Good evening, everybody. Today is the 12th, May 12th, 2022, and we are doing a presentation on vaping. So give me just 1 second here. I'm going to share my screen, and we're probably going to live stream this. So bear with me 1 second. I'm just going to stop my video. And share my screen. All right, we're going to get started in just a second. Good evening, everybody. My name is Carolyn Wilson, and I'm the coordinator for the Groton Alliance for Substance Use Prevention here in the town of Groton. It happens to be Prevention Week this week. So we've been doing a little something every day to acknowledge this observance week. And we're really excited to be delivering this particular presentation because I know it's something that has been on a lot of parents' minds for a while. And I've heard from the schools that while there has been some improvement and a reduction in vaping, it still does happen. So it's really important that we talk about it so you can talk to the kids in your life about it and learn a little bit more about why this is important. But at the end of the day, we also want to know what we can do for prevention. So thank you so much for being with us, and let's get started. So first, I want to give a shout out to our Regional Behavioral Action Organization, CRAC. They were instrumental in creating this presentation, and they are the regional action organization for all of Eastern Connecticut. So they have a lot of ground to cover. So we are thrilled that they can provide us with technical assistance and support, as well as issuing us our local prevention council grants. So very happy to have CRAC on our team, and we're really happy with all the great things that they do. Please visit their website and get on their listserv for great trainings and information. Highly, highly recommend. And while they do talk about substance use prevention, they also talk about mental health, problem gambling, and other things as well. So please check out CRAC. So today what we're going to talk about are very important things having to do with vaping. There are many things we can talk about. One is the law. Some of you may know that there have been some changes that have occurred with the law over the past several years. We're going to talk about the actual devices, which we will call ENDS, electronic nicotine delivery systems, and that's just a blanket term for anything, any sort of e-cigarette or a vaping device. We'll talk about current use among youth and special populations, and effects of use. We'll talk about risk and protective factors associated with vaping, and we'll share strategies for parents to communicate with children, schools, and community about vaping. We will also, as we always do, provide additional resources. So again, we'll talk about what these devices are. We'll talk about why kids vape. We can talk about how parents play a role in prevention. We'll talk about communication, and we'll actually break that down by age group. And we will talk about resources. All right, section 1, let's get started. So let's talk about the following topics. So it's really important to know the law when we're talking about vaping and tobacco. It's important to know you have to be 21 to purchase electronic cigarette products. Some people, who don't purchase them or really may not even know. It used to be 18 and now it's 21. So here's a little bit about that law. You will see in retailers some of these signs about being under 30 and having ID. And these are some of the criminal and civil penalties involved with selling to minors. So as we know, tobacco, you also have to be 21, and the same thing for cannabis now. Adults over the age of 21 can have as much as 1.5 ounces on their person and can transport to 5 ounces in a locked trunk or glove box in their vehicle. In July of 2023, adults can grow as many as 6 plants in their home, a maximum of 12 plants. So that's important to know. That's the new law. Kids caught with tobacco, cigarettes, or e-liquid, so anything under that umbrella, are not referred to the Juvenile Review Board for tobacco products. Youth caught with cannabis can be referred to the JRB for the second or third offenses. Schools are typically not testing confiscated devices. So say, for instance, there's a vaping device, but there's some question about what's in it. Is it an e-liquid for vaping with just nicotine, or does it have a THC product in it? Now, there are testing kits available, but we don't know for sure who uses them and who doesn't. Okay, so this is an example of a typical e-cigarette device, an ENDS. You can see that it's got an LED light, there's a battery, a microprocessor, a sensor, a heater, and a cartridge. So this is how these things work. What will you find in an e-cigarette or a vaping device? Well, some people think there's just water, and that is false. There's a lot of things that can be found in the e-liquid, many of which that are harmful, especially to youth. So first and foremost, we talk about nicotine, which is the addictive habit-forming substance in vaping devices. Not all of them necessarily come with nicotine, but standard they do. Some places do make nicotine-free flavored vape juices, but that's typically not the norm. There are volatile organic compounds that are found in these devices, ultrafine particles, which can be harmful to the lungs, cancer-causing chemicals, heavy metals such as nickel, tin, and lead, and flavoring like diacetyl, a chemical linked to serious lung disease. So several years ago, there was a lot of lung injury happening, and it was mostly linked to the diacetyl. And then, of course, if there is a THC product being used, then obviously you have THC and everything that comes with that. So these are examples of what some of these devices can look like. And this is just a snapshot because really there's many different types. So in addition to that, there are all different things that these are called, right? So, for a long time, it was just called e-cigarettes. Then we kind of called them vapes. The technical term we use is ends, but you can see that we have e-hookahs, some people call them systems, Juuls, Julie, dabbing is like vaping high potency THC. That's an important one. Some of these I've never even heard of. Squonking, I don't know what that is. E-cigars, mods. So that's just something to be aware of, that if you hear your teen talking about something that's a little weird, ask them to clarify what they're talking about, or you can be suspicious and ask somebody else. All right, so what are we talking about with some of these Juul pods or nicotine delivery systems? In some of these cartridges, how much nicotine is actually in them, right? So 1 pack of cigarettes equals about 20 milligrams of nicotine. Now that can vary a little bit, but let's see how much is in a Juul pod. So 1 Juul pod can have twice as much nicotine. So about 2 packs of cigarettes. So that's really concerning. So one of the things that we care a lot about in prevention is introduction of nicotine to the developing brain and how susceptible the brain is to addiction. So this is one of the reasons why this is such a big deal. Furthermore, if you avoid tobacco, you can still get hooked on nicotine through a different way. So it doesn't take very long with this amount of nicotine for your brain to be hooked on the nicotine. So it's important to know that. This is another device called a puff bar, and that one can actually have 50 milligrams of nicotine. So we're not messing around here. And then a Sorin pod, which is another type of device, can have up to 90 milligrams. So again, important to know that many of these leading products have very high amounts of nicotine. And it's hard to sort of meter how much you're taking in, right? So how long does it take you to get through a Juul pod? So obviously prevention, we care a lot about it. Let's talk a little bit about the health effects. So first things first, the e-liquid can be toxic. So if it was accidentally ingested by a person or a dog, it is very serious. Now, when you use an e-cigarette, there can be long-term effects due to exposure of nicotine. So why are we so concerned with this? Learning and cognitive deficits, memory, and attention, very similar to the things we're concerned about with use of THC and cannabis. Mood disorders and impulse control, increased susceptibility to addictions, nicotine and other substances. So this can put you at risk for other habit-forming substances. Teens who vape are 3.5 times more likely to smoke cigarettes and almost 3 times more likely to use marijuana. Now, it doesn't mean everyone is going to do both or switch to cigarettes, but it's really something to be careful about, something to be aware about and to talk about. So, as many of you know, adolescence is a critical time for brain development. Puberty to the age 25 is the second highest period of brain growth after the first 5 years. So these are crucial years for brain development. And of course, when you're a teenager, you do not care about this, but I know a lot of parents do, a lot of healthcare providers do. It's important to think about and to talk about. Okay, so we did talk a little bit about THC and cannabis. So this is certainly something that's happening right now with youth and with adults, and it's important to be aware. So anything can be vaporized, including THC and nicotine. So these are some of the products that are marketed for these high potency THC products, dabs, wax, oil, things like that. And these are concerning because these have up to like 80, 90% THC, which is incredibly intoxicating. So we know that this can be related to mental health issues and psychosis. So if you take a look at some of these, I want you to draw your attention over on the far right here. There's a blowtorch and like this interesting like rig. So this is like really technical, you know, system for how this is done. So, you know, anything with a blowtorch, that's got to be dangerous, you know. Also, there have been some cases where marijuana products have been contaminated with fentanyl. It's not that common, but in cases where people said that they hadn't used anything but marijuana but needed to be revived with Narcan because of an overdose, it's a little bit of a head scratcher. So it's important to know that fentanyl could probably contaminate anything. So especially on the illegal market, you know, certainly if somebody has access to marijuana and fentanyl, you know, it could get contaminated. So unfortunately, you know, it's a little bit of a head scratcher, but it's something to be aware of. Fentanyl is incredibly powerful and concerning and is the lead cause of opioid overdoses and overdose deaths. So we want to, you know, reduce any risk for exposure to fentanyl, unless, of course, it's in a medical environment and it's supervised. So let's talk about youth vaping statistics. This is a chart that shows Connecticut youth use of tobacco and vaping products for about 8-year period. So a good chunk of the decade there. So you can see here how cigarette use has gone down and has sort of plateaued. And you can see the dramatic increase in vaping. So how old are kids when they start vaping? We know that it can range, but you know, 7th, 8th, 9th grade is a big time for experimentation. Those transitional years from middle school to high school can be of particular concern. And you can see these are the different median ages of, you know, kids in the region who and when they say they've tried things. So we really want to be having these discussions as early as possible, definitely by 7th grade. Or maybe depending on where you, yes, I'm here. So depending on, you know, where you, you know, how old your child is, you want to have these discussions. So let's take a look at some more information about who is using vaping devices. So this looks at race and ethnicity, sexual orientation for the year 2019. So you can see here, if we look at the LGBTQ community, that's a particular concern. You can see males and females. You can see the rise in use as kids get older, and you can see race and ethnicity as well. All right, so why do kids vape? We know it's not great. What is the story here? So when youth were asked in the Monitoring the Future survey why they vape, they say they want to experiment and they like the flavors. Easy to conceal, no smell, easy to carry. According to the Truth Initiative, it's because a friend or a family member used them. They like the availability of the flavors like mint, candy, fruit, or chocolate, and the belief that e-cigarettes are less harmful than other forms of tobacco, such as cigarettes. Why do kids vape? So in our regional survey, only 1 out of 3 were aware of the vaping risks. So, you know, I'm in prevention, so I think we've been doing a good job, but apparently we have more work to do and we need all the help we can get. I do know our health teachers are covering vaping, but I think these conversations also need to happen in other settings, at home, in doctors' offices, etc. So 50% of youth said their friends would disapprove of cigarettes, but only a quarter would perceive vaping or cannabis as harmful. So there's a difference there. We've done a good job talking about tobacco and the risks, but unfortunately, we have some catching up to do with vaping and cannabis. Youth who have used Juul flavor pods in the past 30 days said they obtained the device in the following ways. 74% got it from an actual retail location, or 52% got it from a social source. 6% said the internet. All right, here is a video we are going to look at.
It's important to understand that everyone in the world has addictions, or rather natural addictions, to things that are good, like food, water, and sleep. These natural addictions are important for our health and survival, and without them, we would not hunger or crave the things we need to survive. Now, we aren't exactly born with these natural addictions. Our body creates them. Let's look at an example. When you bite into an apple, your brain says, "Yum." Your brain recognizes that this apple is good for you. It has nutrition, vitamins, and gives your body the energy it needs to survive. Whenever the brain recognizes something that's good, it releases a chemical called dopamine. Dopamine causes you to experience pleasure. It's what makes you feel good, like when biting into an apple. The brain releases this dopamine in order to teach the body that this is healthy and good for your survival, and that it should remember to do it again. Now, there are other things we do that can release the pleasurable dopamine, like playing video games, exercising, or reading a good book. However, the amount of dopamine released during these activities is less than what's released when we eat food. The brain does this so it can recognize which is more important. So if you go 2 days without reading a book, or 2 days without eating food, your body is going to crave the food over the book. As such, your brain creates what's called a hierarchy of survival, which ranks how important each of these things is to your survival. Now, there are some things that will not cause the release of dopamine, like eating soap or punching yourself in the face. The brain knows that these things are not good and therefore does not release the pleasurable dopamine because your brain does not want you to do it again. Now, let's look at alcohol, marijuana, tobacco, and other drugs. These are all classified carcinogens, proven to cause cancer and other fatal diseases. Now, your brain should recognize that these things are harmful to your body. However, these substances have special chemical characteristics that fool the brain into releasing dopamine, oftentimes in much greater amounts than the body has ever experienced before. Because of this, the body is fooled into thinking that these things are good and important, sometimes even more important than food, water, or sleep, and consequently hijacks the #1 spot in your survival hierarchy. So now, if you go 2 days without eating or 2 days without drinking alcohol, your body will actually crave the alcohol over the food. This is an extreme case of addiction, where the person addicted believes that they will die if they don't get it. The severity of the addiction depends on where the alcohol or drug lies within your hierarchy of survival, and can increase even with casual use. Research shows that people under the age of 21 are at the highest risk of having their survival hierarchy hijacked. Why? Because their brains are still growing and developing and are hypersensitive to false shocks of dopamine caused by these harmful substances. By 21, the brain is more fully developed and mature, and the survival hierarchy becomes more permanent and less susceptible to getting hijacked. The flip side is that once you are 21, it becomes very difficult to remove these harmful substances from your survival hierarchy. Studies show that 9 out of 10 people who currently struggle with addiction started drinking, smoking, or using before the age of 21. Understanding addiction as a preventable disease can help save millions of lives. The decision to wait until 21 could mean the difference between a life enslaved by addiction or a life full of success and accomplishment. Want to learn more? Visit us at wait21.org.
All right, that is an excellent information about addiction. So let's take a look at the addiction cycle here. Obviously, this is not a science class, but it's important to know how addictive nicotine is. And because high nicotine levels are so strong, addiction can occur quickly. So we really don't have a lot of time to intervene once some young person starts vaping. We don't know exactly how long we have, but obviously we want to intervene as soon as possible. So this is the addiction cycle, and this is pretty much very similar for any substance, important to know. So we're hearing a lot more about fighting stigma in addiction. So we want to be careful when we're talking about substances and substance use disorder that we try to be mindful of how we talk about them. So instead of saying addict, junkie, or druggie, we want to say person with a substance use disorder. Drug use or misuse is preferable to drug abuse. A person living in recovery is preferable to ex-addict or clean. Person arrested for a drug violation is better than a drug offender. Reoccurrence or setback is preferable to relapse, and maintained recovery is preferable to staying clean. Now, I do know that there are some people in recovery who choose to use different words than where we're going. And I believe, personally that, people can speak about themselves however they want. However, when we are speaking about other people, it's important that we show as much respect as possible. And hopefully people will start to depart from the other language that we used to use. Marketing and messaging. So this is a very interesting one, and this is kind of, one of the big things that was in the media for many years. If we take a look at the marketing and how young some of the people look and where the marketing was happening and who was seeing it. So again, lots of marketing, and for a while, it happened very quickly and intensely before there could be any regulation. So it was on billboards, it was at gas stations, it's still at some gas stations, magazines or print. Here it's being highlighted as an alternative to cigarettes. So important to know that, we are exposed to tons of marketing everywhere we go. Still a lot of tobacco marketing, but also this vaping marketing as well. All right, here's another video about marketing that you may find interesting.
This is an ad for one of today's hottest products. If you don't look carefully though, you might miss what it's advertising. It's this little thing, and it's called
Juul. Juul looks more like a flash drive or computer device, but it is really another kind of e-cigarette.
Since it launched in 2015, Juul has taken over about 70% of the e-cigarette retail market share. It's now worth about $16 billion, and that success is often attributed to its sleek design. But the same features that make Juul a well-engineered product also make it attractive to young people, many of whom have never smoked before. And that has people worried, because devices like Juul might be designed to help smokers get off cigarettes, but they're also addicting a new generation to nicotine. So what makes this one e-cigarette so different from the rest? Answering that question starts with what you see on the outside. Juul is an e-cigarette, but it really doesn't look like one. It looks like a tech product, and it's tiny. That allows smokers to get a nicotine fix without having to worry about social stigma, but also allows young users to consume nicotine inconspicuously without having to worry about who sees them.
Going to school, having this in your pocket is a lot better than having like something this big that looks kind of like a lightsaber. You could kind of Juul anywhere in discreetness.
That discreetness is a big shift for e-cigarettes. Since the first patent in 1930, designs haven't been very subtle. The first generation of e-cigarettes mimicked the shape, size, and colors of traditional cigarettes, sometimes even with a fake light-up tip. The second and third generations focused on larger and more customizable devices with longer battery life and big plumes of vapor. Then came the Juul, a stripped-down version with no buttons, no big plumes of vapor, and no complex refilling or recharging. And it comes in a variety of bright colors that set it apart from other e-cigarettes, which made it look like a tech product that young people were already familiar with. That is why people call Juul the iPhone of e-cigs. And that similarity makes sense. Juul's founders met at Stanford Design School, and one worked as a design engineer at Apple. They created the first e-cigarette that looked more like a cool gadget and less like a drug delivery device. This wasn't smoking or vaping. It was juuling.
Yeah, like how grandmas have iPhones now, it's kind of like normal kids have Juuls now. Because it looks so modern, we kind of trust modern stuff a little bit more, so we're like, we can use it, we're not going to have any trouble with it, because you can trust it.
The tech aspect definitely helps people get introduced to it, and then once they're introduced to it, they're staying, because they're conditioned to like all these different products, and then this is another product. And it's just another product until you're addicted to nicotine.
And that is where it gets tricky. A 2017 study found that 25% of 15 to 24-year-olds recognized the Juul in a photo, but the majority of them didn't know that it always contains nicotine. It's easy to trace that information gap. You just have to look at the ads. When you look at Juul's marketing today, you find video testimonials from adult ex-smokers.
My name is Lauren.
My name is Brandon.
My name is Carolyn.
My name is Aman. I'm 38.
But when Juul first launched, their marketing looked a lot different. When you put those ads alongside old cigarette ads, the similarities are pretty striking. Both marketed relaxation, sharing, travel, freedom, and sex appeal. It's now illegal for cigarette brands to use these kinds of suggestive advertising themes. But for e-cigarette manufacturers who had products on the market before 2016, those strategies are still unregulated. That's why a brand like Candy Pens can be promoted in DJ Khaled music videos, just like tobacco corporations used to pay stars to smoke their cigarettes on screen. But compared to cigarettes, Juuls are a lot easier to start using. Typical e-cigarettes have between 6 and 30 milligrams of nicotine per milliliter of vape liquid. One Juul pod packs in 59 milligrams. That's 3 times the nicotine levels permitted in the European Union, which is why Juul isn't sold there. But here in the US, e-cigarettes don't have the same restrictions, even though we know that nicotine dependency can prime developing brains for future substance abuse disorders. The company says that Juul's nicotine content is about as much as a pack of cigarettes, though tobacco experts say it's likely more than that. And Juuls have a patented system for delivering that nicotine. Most e-cigarettes use a potent version of nicotine called freebase that gives users a strong hit. But Juuls vaporize a liquid made from nicotine salts. Those salts allow nicotine to be absorbed into the body at about the same speed as regular cigarettes, much faster than most e-cigarettes. But unlike freebase nicotine, which can be irritating, nicotine salt goes down smoothly. So Juul packs a bigger nicotine dose into a much more pleasant hit than most devices on the market. And that has public health officials worried, because the US almost beat nicotine addiction among kids.
As cigarette smoking among those under 18 has fallen, the use of other nicotine products, and especially e-cigarettes, has taken a drastic leap.
In April, the FDA demanded that Juul submit documents on its marketing and research. A group of senators sent a letter asking Juul to stop using flavors and designs that appeal to children, and there are now 3 lawsuits alleging that Juul contains too much nicotine. In response to the concerns, the makers of Juul have pledged $30 million to combat underage use. Merchandise and marketing materials now have big warning labels on them, and the company is developing lower nicotine pods. The trouble is, there's still a lot we don't know about the long-term health impacts of e-cigarettes. Juul, like other e-cigarettes, might have set out to design a solution to a public health problem, but in a lot of ways, their product has created a new one.
All right, so that's an excellent video, really good perspective there.
This is an ad for one of today's hottest products. If you don't look carefully, though, you might miss what it's advertising.
Sorry, that was a repeat of the last video. All right, so let's talk about some other like counter marketing. So we know that there's some great counter marketing out there that's targeted at youth to try and counteract some of the other messages they're seeing. So this is an example. All right, here's a video.
Breathe in and wonder, is this helping? breathe. Now you should feel much worse. Vaping nicotine can actually increase feelings of stress and anxiety. Let's call a vape what it is. It's a breath of stress air. See for yourself. breathofstressair.com.
All right, so that was from the Truth Initiative.
Breathe in.
So let's talk about vaping risk factors by environmental level. So in prevention, we commonly talk about things called environmental strategies. So what can put somebody at risk, and what can we do about it? So at the individual level, we can see that if somebody doesn't think something's harmful or has a low perceived risk, they could be at risk for vaping. Subgroups of youth vape higher. We're particularly concerned with the LGBTQ community, and white non-Hispanic youth seem to have the highest rates. And it's important to remember that younger people, youth, especially under the age of 25, are vulnerable to addiction, like we talked about with the brain development. On a relationship level, we can talk about perception of peer approval, perception of parent approval, observing parents' use, social access, being able to obtain vapes from friends or parents, and social culture of vaping with peers. So what are youth seeing? What do their friends think? What are their friends doing? What are their parents doing? What do they see in their social circles and in their community? So important things to think about there. Now, in terms of the higher level, on the community, society, and cultural level, retail access, are retailers passing their compliance checks? Are they checking for IDs? Social access at school. Are kids bringing them into school? Are they sharing them? Are they doing it in the bathroom? Are they buying them from one another? School and workplace policies. What are the policies in schools? Well, those are pretty strict for the most part, but some workplaces may not have the same policies. And then, of course, the regulatory issues, labeling, pricing, and taxes. So now that we've talked about all of this, some of you are, wondering, what can we do? Now that we know this, and apparently not everyone has gotten the memo, what do we do? So substance use prevention is a planned combination of coordinated policies, programs, and practices that target individuals, families, and communities to stop or delay first use of substances and promote mental health. So what are the protective factors? We've talked about risk. Now, what can make it easier for kids not to use? Let's look at the individual level first. If they think they're harmful, how harmful do they think vaping is? Belief in a moral order, what is right, what is wrong? A pro-social involvement, so involvement in activities, maybe sports, music, drama, clubs. Academic success, so performance in school, commitment to school, showing up, attendance, and pride in grades. Relationship level, again, friends. What are the friends doing? Do they have favorable attitudes or unfavorable attitudes? What do the kids think is cool? So in a friend group, what kind of activities are the young people involved in? Who do they hang out with? Family attachment, that's a tricky one. So feeling loved and valued by your family and feeling like they're around and supportive. Pro-social opportunities with family. So are family involved in school activities, come to sports games, are parents home, or are they working all the time, etc. Pro-social rewards from family. So what's in it for the teen to not use? Do they receive praise when they do well, when they do positive things, or are they really not being monitored at all and not getting any positive feedback or reward? Again, the higher level with community, society, and culture. So we care a lot in public health about laws and regulations that limit access and usage of substances. So, how many tobacco retailers or how many vaping retailers are there? And how are they doing on their compliance checks? Laws and regulations that restrict marketing to teens. Obviously, we saw a lot of that in the news over the past several years, sort of a reaction to all of the heavy marketing that was happening to youth that was not supposed to be happening. And the norms that deem substance use is unfavorable. So what is the community norm? Is it, what's cool? What's the norm? What do people see in their communities? They see a lot of people using different substances or vaping, or do they not? So what can we do about it? So we need to have action. We can have information, we can have awareness, but then what do we do? So for parents, now this is a little tricky, so bear with me. Being tobacco or vaping free, it's never too late to quit. So this is not a judgmental aspect. However, as we talked about, kids will often model what they see in their role models and the people around them. So if you grow up around smoking or vaping, you may also smoke or vape. Not necessarily, but again, we know a lot about tobacco and vaping in terms of health, so it's always good to be tobacco and vape free. Talking to your kids about vaping and ends and why they're unsafe. So, in prevention, we are kind of a broken record because all we do is talk about how important it is to talk to your kids. Again, there's a reason why we do that, because believe it or not, teens do listen to their parents, especially when they're saying what their rules and expectations are. Now, doesn't mean they're going to like it, but if you ask a kid, do your parents have rules about substance use? They'll be able to say, yes, they do, or no, they don't, or my parents don't care, or my parents would kill me. So, they are listening. It's normal for a little teen rebellion, but for the most part, teens do want to please their parents. Tell your kids that you don't want them doing that. Set those expectations. It does matter. Set clear rules, and this goes for any other substance as well. And if you use cannabis, make sure to store it securely and keep it away from kids. This isn't something to be shared with young people, either intentionally or by accident. Schools. This is a tricky one. We hear a lot about vaping in schools. So policies are important. It's important to, remind people about the laws. So it's illegal to sell tobacco or vaping products to anyone under 21. And making sure to have tobacco-free school policies 24/7. So not just during school hours, but football games, weekends, etc. Teachers, keep an eye out for, I know some of you, if you're watching, have been frustrated by this. Some of the devices are easy to conceal, and kids sometimes get away with it in class. But, it's important to keep an eye out and enforce school policy. We want to teach the hazards of use, especially, in health class. I think that's a great place to do it. And I know our health teachers in Groton do a great job. Youth prevention education in schools should follow best practice recommendations. So, and I know that our schools do. In the community, implement evidence-based prevention strategies known to reduce tobacco, including pricing, strong smoke-free laws and policies, social marketing campaigns to increase perception of harm or risk, enforce the tobacco age 21, so checking for IDs and doing compliance checks, and adopting tobacco and vape-free policies, and still promoting tobacco-free lifestyles is still a best practice. So when we look at the different age groups, there are some communication tips on how to talk about this. So we look at the youngsters, we look at elementary, preteens, and teens. So always keep conversations open and honest. Come from a place of love, even when you're having tough conversations. Balance positive reinforcement with negative consequences. And keep in mind that teachable moments come up all the time, and be mindful of natural places for the conversation to go in order to broach the topic of drugs and alcohol. So a conversation was one of the most powerful tools a parent can use, and we say this all the time. Through powerful talking Although powerful, talking to youth about drugs and alcohol can be very challenging. Let's talk about the different age groups. All right, boundaries. Giving clear, direct rules. Consistency is key. Appropriate, congruent body language. Remain decisive and follow through with consequences. Recognize when they have stuck by the boundaries you've set, and developmentally appropriate expectations. So this is a funny one. I want you to have everything in the world that your heart desires. Can I have ice cream? No. All right, so let's look at the youngsters. Apparently there's really no age that's too early to talk about this. Since the foundation for all healthy habits from nutrition to toothbrushing is laid out during the preschool years, this is a great time to set the stage for a drug-free life. Explain the importance of taking good care of our bodies, celebrate your child's decision-making, help steer away from dangerous substances that exist in their immediate world, turn frustration into a learning opportunity. When the kids are a little bit older, talk to your kids about drug-related messages they receive. Keep your discussions about substances on the present. Set clear rules and explain the reasons for your rules. Work on problem solving by helping them find long-lasting solutions. Give your kids the power to escape from situations that make them feel bad. All right, preteens, this is very important. Make sure your child knows your rules and that you'll enforce the consequences if rules are broken. Let your kids know that they can always use you as an excuse. My mom will kill me. I can't, or else I'll be grounded, stuff like that. What can you encourage? What are their strengths? Get to know your child's friends and their friends' parents. All right, the teenage years. This is a pivotal time for parents in helping kids make positive choices when faced with drugs and alcohol. Help your teen create an exit plan. How is their no muscle? So prevention used to get a really bad rap back in the day for the whole just say no thing, but really the power of refusal skills remain very important. It's important to be able to say no when you mean no, and to make it clear about what you want and what you don't want. So that's an important thing to know how to do. Make it clear that you disapprove of alcohol, tobacco, and drug use. So as a parent, again, we've said this a couple of times, make sure your kids know how you feel. Because they will pay attention, even if it seems like they're not interested, listening. What are your rules and what are the consequences? What are the rewards? So like we want to take bad behavior seriously, we also want to make sure that good behavior is rewarded. And of course, the exit plan here. Practice ways of saying no firmly, leave the situation, create a code word if your teen calls you and would like to be picked up. That's a great one. Praise your teen when they take steps to leave a situation and communicates it with you. So if you see your teen leaving a party or something, or they tell you that they were offered to vape in the bathroom and they don't, make sure that you let them know how proud you are. And again, some of the resources that I would recommend if you're interested in learning more, especially about the counter marketing, is the Truth Initiative. There is a curriculum out of Stanford that's very attractive and appealing, and a lot of places use it. There is the Catch My Breath campaign, and then of course the American Lung Association. Now, if somebody needs help quitting, there's Commit to Quit. So that is something from DPH, 1-800-QUIT-NOW or committoquit.com. Again, there's the Truth Initiative. Prevention messages are aired across television and digital platforms targeted at young people ages 15 to 24. The messages describe the harms associated with smoking and vaping. That's a great one. Smoke Free, U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, free online resources for teens, veterans, seniors, and Spanish language resources. And then, of course, our friends at CRAC, 21 Reasons to Quit, tips for parents, and recommendations for retailers. Okay. So thank you all for joining. Really appreciate you taking the time to watch this. And we hope that you'll find it useful. And if you're a parent, that it will give you some tips for how to talk to your teen. Please feel free to reach out to us if you have any questions ever. We have social media at Groton_prevents. And of course, you can find me at Ledgelight Health District. So thank you again. I'm Carolyn Wilson, the coordinator for GASP. Happy Prevention Week. Thank you so much for joining us.